They say revenge is a dish best served turtle, but Grace Blackwood preferred hers served with a side of public humiliation and a glass of vintage champagne. She spent 5 years scrubbing floors and bowing her head to a woman who saw her as nothing more than a placeholder. She thought if she loved her son enough, she would earn her place at the table. She was wrong. On her 60th birthday, Grace's mother-in-law didn't just break her heart. She tried to destroy her life in front of the city's elite. She handed Grace divorce papers as a party favor. She thought she had won. She didn't know that she'd just handed the Queen back her crown. The grandfather clock in the hallway of the Harrison estate chimed 6 times, the sound echoing off the marble floors like a gavel striking a judge's bench. Grace wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the final orchid in the massive centerpiece on the dining table. Tonight was the night. It was Victoria Harrison's 60th birthday, the Diamond Jubilee, as she had insisted on calling it, and the entire elite social circle of Seattle was descending upon the estate. "Grace!" The sharp voice cut through the air, causing Grace to flinch. Victoria stood at the top of the grand staircase, looking like a monarch surveying her subjects. She was wearing a custom-made emerald gown that cost more than Grace's parents had made in a decade. Her graying hair was pulled back into a severe chignon, pulling her face tight and emphasizing her sharp, hawk-like nose. "Yes, Victoria?" Grace asked, smoothing down her simple black dress. It was the dress Victoria had picked out for her. "Blend in, dear," she had said, "like the staff. The caterers are asking about the champagne flutes for the toast. I specifically requested the crystal from the vault, not these everyday glasses," Victoria said, waving a hand dismissively at the table Grace had spent 2 hours setting. I brought the crystal out, Victoria. I polished them myself," Grace said, her voice soft. Victoria descended the stairs, the fabric of her dress swishing ominously. She stopped inches from Grace, her perfume, a heavy, cloying scent of gardenias filling Grace's senses. "Well, check them again. I won't have my reputation tarnished because my son's charity case couldn't handle simple stemware." Grace swallowed the lump in her throat. Charity case. That was all she was to them. 5 years ago, she had met Liam Harrison. He was charming, wealthy, and seemingly kind. Grace, a scholarship student working 2 jobs to finish her architecture degree, had fallen hard. When they married, she thought she was gaining a family. Instead, she became the unpaid manager of the Harrison household. "I'll check them immediately," Grace whispered. "Good. And try to stay out of the photos tonight, Grace. We have Senator Miller and the CEO of Archer Hale Enterprises coming. We want to project an image of excellence." As Victoria swept away toward the kitchen to terrorize the chef, Grace caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. She looked tired. At 27, she had gray circles under her eyes. She had given up her career at a boutique firm to support Liam's startup, Nexus Tech, handling his accounting and back-end logistics from home while managing this massive estate. "Hey!" Grace turned to see Liam walking in from the study. He looked dashing in his tuxedo, but his tie was crooked. Instinctively, Grace reached out to fix it. "You look handsome, Liam," she said, hoping for a smile. Liam pulled away slightly, checking his phone. "Thanks. Look, Grace, tonight is huge for me. Investors are going to be here. Nexus needs capital. Just don't make waves, okay? Mother is already on edge." "I never make waves, Liam," Grace said, a pang of hurt striking her chest. "I made your mother a gift, a photo album of the family history," I restored the old pictures myself. Liam finally looked at her, his eyes unreadable. There was no warmth there, only a strange mix of pity and annoyance. Yeah, that's nice. Just give it to her later. In private. Why in private, I thought. Just do as I say, Grace. He snapped, then lowered his voice as the doorbell rang. Please, just tonight. He turned and walked towards the door, putting on his business smile, the dazzling grin that had made Grace fall in love with him. He opened the door to welcome the first guests, the Vanderbilts from the yacht club. Grace retreated into the shadows of the hallway. She felt a cold knot forming in her stomach. She had a feeling that tonight wasn't just about a birthday. The air in the house felt heavy, charged with static electricity waiting for a spark. She didn't know that the spark was already lit, and it was burning down the fuse straight toward her. By 8:00 p.m., the party was in full swing. The Harrison estate was a cacophony of laughter, clinking crystal, and the soft hum of a string quartet playing in the corner. Waiters navigated through the crowd with trays of caviar and truffle oil hors d'oeuvres. Grace stood near the back of the room, holding a glass of sparkling water. She watched Liam across the room. He was laughing at something a blonde woman in a shimmering red dress said. Grace recognized her. It was Jessica Sterling, the daughter of a real estate tycoon. She and Liam had dated in college. Jessica had always looked at Grace like she was something stuck to the bottom of her Louboutin heel. Jessica placed a hand on Liam's arm, laughing a little too loudly. Liam didn't pull away. In fact, he leaned in closer. Disgusting, isn't it? Grace jumped. She turned to see Aunt Margaret Victoria's estranged sister standing next to her. Margaret was the black sheep of the family because she drank beer instead of wine and spoke her mind. I don't know what you mean, Aunt Margaret, Grace lied. The way they parade around, Margaret muttered, taking a sip of her drink. You're too good for this lot, Grace. I've told you that for years. You have talent. I saw those sketches you did for the garden renovation. You shouldn't be playing housemaid. Liam needs me, Grace said automatically. Nexus Tech is finally taking off. Margaret looked at her sadly. Honey, Liam needs a mirror, not a wife. Watch your back tonight. Before Grace could ask what she meant, the music stopped. The room went silent as Victoria Harrison stepped onto the small raised platform near the fireplace. She tapped a spoon against her champagne flute, one of the crystal ones Grace had polished. Attention, everyone. Victoria purred, her voice amplified by the acoustics of the high ceiling. Thank you all for coming to celebrate my 60th. It means the world to me to be surrounded by true friends and family. The crowd applauded politely. Liam walked up to the stage, standing next to his mother. Jessica Sterling followed him, standing just a step behind, smiling like the cat who got the cream. Grace frowned. Why was Jessica up there? Tonight is a night of new beginnings, Victoria announced, her eyes scanning the crowd until they locked onto Grace. A cruel smirk played on her lips. As many of you know, the Harrison legacy is built on strength, pedigree, and suitable alliances. Grace felt the blood drain from her face. Everyone turned to look at her. Grace, darling, come here. Victoria beckoned. Grace froze. Her legs felt like lead. She slowly walked through the parting crowd. She could feel the judgment, the whispers. She clutched the small, beautifully wrapped photo album she had brought. When she reached the platform, Victoria didn't hug her. She didn't smile warmly. She reached into an unseen pocket of her emerald dress and pulled out a thick manila envelope. For 5 years we have tried, Victoria said, her voice dropping to a theatrical tone of sadness. We tried to mold you. We tried to elevate you. But a diamond cannot be polished from a lump of coal. Gasps rippled through the room. "Happy birthday to me," Victoria said, her voice turning icy. She shoved the envelope into Grace's chest. "My son has a gift for you, Grace. Freedom." Grace's hands shook as she took the envelope. She looked at Liam. He was staring at the floor, refusing to meet her eyes. "Liam," she whispered. "Open it," Victoria commanded. Grace tore the seal. Inside was a legal document. The bold letters at the top screamed at her. Decree of divorce. "Liam and I have discussed this," Victoria announced to the room, as if discussing a business merger. "He needs a partner who understands his world. Jessica has kindly agreed to step in as the director of marketing for Nexus Tech, and as Liam's fiancée." Grace felt like the floor had opened up beneath her. "Fiancé, but we aren't even divorced yet." "You signed a prenup, dear," Victoria sneered. "And Liam signed these papers this morning. You have nothing. No claim to the house. No claim to the company. No claim to the money." Grace looked at Liam again, desperation clawing at her throat. "Liam, tell them. Tell them about the nights I stayed up doing the books. Tell them who designed the software interface." "Liam." Liam finally looked up. His face was hard. "It's over, Grace. You don't fit. You never did. Just sign the acknowledgement and go. Please don't make a scene." Jessica stepped forward, linking her arm through Liam's. "Don't worry, Grace. I'll take good care of him. And the house. I'm thinking of redoing the kitchen immediately. It's so pedestrian." Laughter. The crowd was laughing. They were sipping their champagne and watching Grace's life shatter for entertainment. Grace looked down at the photo album in her hand. The hours of restoration, the love she had poured into it. She looked at the divorce papers. She didn't cry. That was the strangest part. The tears didn't come. Instead, a cold, hard clarity washed over her. It was the same clarity she used when looking at architectural blueprints, seeing the structural flaws that would cause a building to collapse. She realized then that the Harrison family wasn't a fortress. It was a house of cards, and they had just handed her the wind. Grace dropped the photo album. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. She looked Victoria dead in the eye. "You want me to leave?" Grace asked, her voice surprisingly steady. "Immediately," Victoria said. "Your bags are already packed by the back door. The driver will take you to a motel." "Fine," Grace said. She turned to Liam. "You think Nexus Tech is yours?" "It's in my name," Liam scoffed. "The name, yes," Grace said, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "But check the patent filings for the core algorithm, Liam. You were always too lazy to read the fine print." She turned and walked away. The crowd parted for her, not out of respect, but out of confusion. As she reached the door, she heard Victoria's shrill voice. "She's bluffing. Ignore her music. Play the music." Grace walked out into the cool Seattle night. Her old sedan was parked around the back, her 2 suitcases sitting on the pavement next to the dumpster. She picked up her phone. She dialed a number she hadn't called in 5 years. "Hello?" A deep male voice answered. "Ethan." Grace said, her voice breaking for the first time. "It's me. I'm ready to come home. And I'm ready to take the job." "It's about time, little sister," Ethan replied. "The board has been waiting for you." The headlights of a sleek, matte black Rolls-Royce Phantom cut through the darkness, pulling up to the curb where Grace stood shivering next to her battered suitcases. The contrast was stark, the epitome of luxury, meeting the discarded wreckage of her marriage. The driver, a man built like a tank, stepped out and opened the rear door. Ethan Blackwood stepped out. He was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than the entire Harrison house. He looked at his sister, taking in her pale face and the cheap dress Victoria had forced her to wear. "Get in," Ethan said, his voice low and dangerous. "I'll deal with the luggage." Grace slid into the leather interior, the warmth of the car enveloping her instantly. She sank back, the adrenaline finally fading, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. As they pulled away, leaving the Harrison estate in the rearview mirror, Ethan poured her a glass of scotch from the crystal decanter in the center console. "Drink," he ordered gently. Grace took a sip, the liquid burning her throat in a good way. "I was so stupid, Ethan. You told me. Dad told me." "You were in love," Ethan said, his eyes fixed on the road. "And you wanted to prove that you could be loved for Grace, not for the Blackwood billions. It was a noble experiment. A failed one, but noble." Grace laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "They treated me like a servant. For 5 years I hid who I was. I hid the fact that our family owns half the skyline in this city. I thought if I worked hard, if I built Liam's company from the ground up, they would respect me. And instead I built a throne for a king who stabbed me in the back." Grace looked out the window. "Does Dad know the chairman?" Ethan smirked. "He's been waiting for this phone call since the wedding day. He never trusted Liam. He's already called the legal team. They are assembling a war room at the headquarters tonight." Grace closed her eyes. The Blackwood family. They were old money, powerful money. Her father, Cyrus Blackwood, was a ruthless industrialist. When Grace had insisted on marrying Liam, a nobody with a charm smile and a start-up dream, Cyrus had cut her off financially, not out of cruelty, but to let her learn her lesson. He had told her, "When you are ready to be a wolf again, the pack will be waiting." "I'm ready to be a wolf, Ethan," she whispered. Meanwhile, back at the Harrison estate, the party was winding down. Victoria was basking in the compliments of her guests, drunk on champagne and cruelty. "You handled that beautifully, Victoria," Jessica Sterling cooed, clutching Liam's arm. "She was such a drag, always moping around in those rags." Liam, however, wasn't smiling. He had slipped away to his home office. He needed to show the potential investors Mr. Archer and Mr. Hale the projected revenue for Q3. He sat down at his desk and wiggled the mouse to wake his computer. He clicked on the Nexus Tech dashboard icon. Access denied. Liam frowned. He typed in his password. "Invalid credentials." "What the hell?" he muttered. He tried the admin override. System lockdown initiated. Unlicensed user. Panic flared in his chest. He picked up his phone and dialed the number for the server technician, a guy named Dave, who Grace had hired. "Dave, I can't get into the system," Liam barked. "Liam!" Dave's voice sounded awkward. Yeah, I don't work for you anymore, man." "What you can't quit. We have investors here." "I didn't quit. My contract was with the freelance architect who managed the back end. Grace. She terminated the contract 10 minutes ago, and Liam. The servers. They're hers." "What do you mean they're hers?" Liam shouted, causing the guests in the hallway to pause. "The cloud architecture, the proprietary algorithm. It's all hosted on servers she paid for. She owns the IP Liam. You were just the front-end user. She pulled the plug. The app is dead. It's just a shell. The line went dead. Liam stared at the black screen. Nexus Tech wasn't just offline. It was gone. The revolutionary AI sorting algorithm that he had pitched to investors, the thing that was supposed to make him a billionaire, wasn't his code. He had been too busy playing golf and networking to learn the back end. Grace had done it all. She said she was tidying up the code. She had actually been building the engine. The door to the study opened. Victoria walked in, holding a glass of wine. "Liam, darling, Mr. Archer is asking for you. He wants to discuss the bridge loan." Liam looked at his mother, his face pale as a sheet. "We have a problem." "Don't be dramatic," Victoria scoffed. "Nothing is a problem now that the dead weight is gone." Liam swallowed hard. He couldn't tell her yet. He couldn't admit that the dead weight was the only thing keeping their financial Titanic afloat. "Right." Liam lied, his voice trembling. "I'll be right there." 3 weeks had passed since the birthday party. The atmosphere inside the Harrison household had shifted from jubilant to suffocating. The air conditioner had broken down 2 days ago, and the repair company refused to come out until the outstanding balance of $4,000 was paid. Victoria sat at the kitchen table, fanning herself with a stack of overdue bills. "Why hasn't the maid come?" Victoria snapped. "The floors are filthy." "We let the maid go, remember?" Liam said from the counter, where he was eating a bowl of cereal because the private chef had walked out on Tuesday. "To save cash until the Archer deal goes through." "Well, where is the deal, Liam?" Victoria slammed her hand on the table. "I have the club membership renewal due, and Jessica is asking why you haven't bought her the engagement ring yet." Liam rubbed his temples. He hadn't slept in days. Nexus Tech was hemorrhaging. Without the algorithm, the app was useless. Customers were cancelling subscriptions by the thousands. He had hired a team of expensive coders to try and replicate what Grace had done, but they were scratching their heads. Grace's code was a labyrinth of brilliance, and she had taken the key. "I'm meeting with Archer Hale Enterprises today at noon," Liam said. "If I can just get them to sign the check, we can rebuild the back end. I just need capital." "Make sure you do," Victoria warned. "Jessica's father is starting to ask questions about your liquidity. We cannot lose the sterling connection, Liam. We simply cannot." Liam adjusted his tie in the reflection of the microwave. He looked gaunt. "I got this." At 11:45 a.m., Liam walked into the towering glass skyscraper of Archer Hale Enterprises in downtown Seattle. He felt small. This was the big leagues. He straightened his jacket and approached the receptionist. "Liam Harrison to see Mr. Archer," he said confidently. "Mr. Harrison," the receptionist said without looking up. "You're expected. Top floor, boardroom B." Liam rode the elevator up, his heart pounding. This was it. He would charm them. He would sell them on the vision, even if the product was currently broken. He was a Harrison, after all. He walked into boardroom B. It was an intimidating room, with a long mahogany table and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Mr. Archer sat at the head of the table. He was a stern man with silver hair. Next to him sat Mr. Hale. But there was a third chair, turned away from the door, facing the window. "Gentlemen," Liam said, flashing his winning smile. "Thank you for seeing me. I know there have been some technical hiccups with the Nexus launch, but I assure you—" "Mr. Harrison," Mr. Archer interrupted, his voice cold. "We aren't here to discuss the launch. We are here to discuss the audit." "Audit?" Liam blinked. We conducted a due diligence audit on Nexus Tech, Mr. Hale said, sliding a thick folder across the table. It appears you are selling a product you do not own. That's a misunderstanding, Liam stammered. My ex-wife. She was a disgruntled employee. She stole the code. The chair facing the window slowly swiveled around. Liam's breath hitched. Sitting there was a woman. But it wasn't the Grace he knew. The Grace he knew wore oversized sweaters and no makeup. She kept her hair in a messy bun. This woman was sharp as a blade. She wore a tailored white power suit that accentuated a fierce confidence. Her hair was styled in sleek, glossy waves. She wore diamonds, real ones, heavy and flawless around her neck. But her eyes were the same, cold, calculating. I didn't steal the code, Liam, Grace said, her voice smooth like velvet over gravel. I wrote it. Every line. Grace, Liam whispered, what are you doing here? How did you get in? Allow me to introduce our new majority stakeholder, Mr. Archer said, gesturing to Grace. This is Ms. Grace Blackwood, of the Blackwood Global Group. The name hit Liam like a physical blow. Blackwood, no. Liam shook his head, laughing nervously. No, her name is Grace Smith. She's nobody. She's from a trailer park in Ohio. Grace stood up. She placed her hands on the table and leaned forward. I told you I was from Ohio. I didn't say I was poor. I wanted to see if you loved me, Liam. I wanted to see if you were a man of character. She picked up a remote and clicked it. A screen descended from the ceiling. It displayed a graph. The line on the graph was plummeting straight down. This is your company's value over the last 3 weeks, Grace explained. It's currently worth less than the shoes I'm wearing. You ruined me. Liam hissed, his face turning red. I reclaimed my property, Grace corrected. Now on to business. Archer Hale is pulling their offer, obviously. You can't do that, Liam shouted. We had a verbal agreement. Read the contract, Liam, Grace said. Clause 4, Section B, investment is contingent upon full ownership of intellectual property. You don't own it. I do. Liam slumped into a chair. Grace, please. Mom is going to lose the house. We leveraged the estate to pay for the marketing campaign. If this deal falls through, the bank takes the manor. Grace's expression didn't soften. The manor? You mean the house where I scrubbed the toilets? The house where your mother told me I wasn't good enough to drink from her crystal? I'm sorry, Liam pleaded. I was an idiot. I got caught up in the pressure. Jessica. She meant nothing. We can fix this. You and me. You still love me. Right? 5 years, Grace. Grace walked around the table until she stood right in front of him. For a second, Liam thought she might hug him. Instead, she reached into her briefcase and pulled out a document. This is a patent infringement lawsuit, Grace said, dropping it into his lap. I'm suing Nexus Tech for $50 million in damages for the unauthorized use of my algorithm during your beta phase. $50 million? We don't have $50. Then I guess we'll be taking assets, Grace said calmly. Starting with your personal assets. And since you didn't read the prenup properly either. What? The prenup protected my premarital assets. Grace smiled. It didn't protect yours. Since you commingled the business funds with your personal accounts to hide money from the taxman. Yes, I know about the Cayman accounts. Liam, everything you own is now liable. Liam looked at her with pure horror. He was looking at a predator he had mistaken for a pet. You're a monster, he whispered. I'm a Blackwood, Grace replied. And you're trespassing in my boardroom. Security. 2 large guards entered the room. "Escort Mr. Harrison out," Grace said, turning her back on him to look out the window at the city she was about to conquer. "And make sure he validates his parking. We don't give handouts here." As Liam was dragged out, screaming her name, Grace didn't flinch. She picked up her phone and dialed Ethan. "Phase 1 is complete," she said. "He knows. Now let's go after the house. I want to buy it before foreclosure auction." "Why?" Ethan asked on the other end. "Because," Grace said, her eyes flashing, "I have a birthday coming up, and I think I want to throw a party." Victoria Harrison was sitting in the plush velvet chair of the La Belle Salon, waiting for her platinum card to be returned so she could leave. She had just received the diamond package, a facial massage and hair treatment that cost $600. She needed it. The stress of the last few weeks had been etching new lines into her face. The receptionist, a young girl named Sarah, who usually fawned over Victoria, walked back to the chair. She wasn't smiling. She held the card between 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. "Mrs. Harrison," Sarah said, loud enough for the other patrons to hear. "Your card was declined." Victoria laughed a sharp, incredulous bark. "Don't be ridiculous. Run it again. It's a black Amex. It doesn't decline." "I ran it 3 times, Sarah said, her voice flat. "It says, account frozen, seized by creditor. Do you have another form of payment?" The silence in the salon was deafening. Ladies who Victoria had dined with women she considered her peers were suddenly fascinated by their cuticles. "There must be a mistake," Victoria hissed, digging into her purse for her backup visa. "Declined," Sarah said 10 seconds later. "And the system says I have to cut the cards." Victoria left the salon 20 minutes later, having written a personal check that she knew would bounce her face burning with a humiliation hotter than any sauna. She drove her Mercedes home. The lease was up next month, dreading the conversation she would have to have with the bank. When she pulled into the driveway of the Harrison estate, she saw a sight that made her blood run cold. A tow truck was hooked up to Liam's Porsche. "Stop!" Victoria screamed, scrambling out of her car. "What are you doing? Unhand that vehicle immediately!" The tow truck driver, a burly man with a clipboard, didn't even look up. "Repossession order. Payments are 4 months behind. Step away from the vehicle, ma'am." Victoria ran into the house, screaming for her son. Liam, they're taking the car." She found Liam in the living room. He was sitting on the floor in the dark, a half-empty bottle of whiskey beside him. He was still wearing the suit from his meeting with Archer Hale, but his tie was on the floor, and his shirt was unbuttoned. "Let them take it," Liam mumbled, staring at the wall. "They're taking everything else." "What are you talking about?" Victoria demanded, looming over him. "Fix this," Liam called Jessica. "Her father will lend us the money. We are Harrisons. We do not get repossessed." Liam looked up, his eyes bloodshot and hollow. He let out a dark, broken laugh. Jessica is gone, Mother. She left about an hour ago." "Left where?" "She packed her bags. She said she doesn't date projects. She saw the lawsuit papers." "Lawsuit?" Victoria felt the room spin. "Grace." Liam whispered the name like a curse. "Grace isn't Grace Smith, Mother. She's Grace Blackwood." Victoria froze. "Blackwood, as in Cyrus Blackwood, the steel and shipping tycoon?" "The very same," Liam said, taking a swig of the bottle. "She's the heiress. She owns the code. She owns the company. And as of this morning, she bought the debt on this house." Victoria collapsed onto the sofa. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The poise, the intelligence Grace had hidden, the way she had silently managed their lives. They had treated a billionaire heiress like a scullery maid. "She's suing us for $50 million, Liam continued, "and she initiated foreclosure proceedings on the estate an hour ago. We have 48 hours to vacate." "No," Victoria gasped, clutching her pearls. "This is my house. I have lived here for 30 years. I am the queen of this society." "You're a tenant being evicted by your daughter-in-law," Liam spat. "We're broke, Mum. It's over. The Diamond Jubilee was the last party we'll ever throw." The doorbell rang. It wasn't a guest. It was a process server. He handed Victoria a thick stack of papers. "Notice to vacate." Victoria stared at the paper. She thought of Grace, the quiet girl she had forced to polish the crystal. She remembered handing her the divorce papers as a gift. The karma didn't just hit, it bulldozed through the front door. 2 days later, the sky over Seattle opened up, unleashing a torrential downpour that matched the mood of the Harrison exodus. There were no moving trucks. They couldn't afford them. Instead, Liam and Victoria were shoving clothes, jewelry, and whatever small heirlooms they could carry into the back of Victoria's Mercedes, which they were hiding in the garage to avoid the repo man until the last second. The staff had all left the day the checks bounced. The house, usually pristine, was already starting to look abandoned. Dust motes danced in the grey light, filtering through the windows. Victoria walked through the dining room one last time. She touched the table where she had held court for decades. She looked at the spot where she had humiliated Grace. "Come on, Mother," Liam shouted from the hallway. He was carrying a box of his trophies participation awards from a life of mediocrity. "We have to go. The sheriff is on his way to lock the perimeter." "Where are we going?" Victoria asked, her voice trembling. She looked small, frail. The arrogance had been stripped away, leaving only a frightened old woman. "The Starlight Motel on Route 9, Liam muttered. It's all we can afford with the cash I have in my wallet." The Starlight Motel. It was a place Victoria had driven past and sneered at for years. A place for transients and failures. As they dragged the last box out to the car, a sleek black limousine pulled into the long driveway. It splashed through the puddles commanding the road. The back door opened. An umbrella popped out, held by a driver. Then Grace stepped out. She wasn't wearing a suit today. She was wearing a stunning crimson trench coat and high-heeled boots. She looked vibrant, alive, and powerful against the grey backdrop of the storm. Ethan stood beside her, looking at the house with a critical eye. Liam froze by the trunk of the Mercedes. He looked at Grace, then down at his wet shoes. He couldn't even meet her gaze. Victoria, however, felt a surge of desperate delusion. She straightened her spine and walked toward Grace. "Grace," Victoria said, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Thank goodness you're here. This has all been a terrible misunderstanding. Liam explained the situation. We are family, aren't we? You married my son. Surely you aren't going to throw your own mother-in-law onto the street." Grace looked at Victoria. She didn't look angry. She looked bored. "My mother-in-law died a long time ago," Grace said calmly. "Or rather, the idea of her did. The woman standing in front of me is just a squatter on my property." "How can you be so cruel?" Victoria cried, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "I gave you a home. I let you live here." "You made me a servant in my own marriage," Grace corrected. "You made me feel small so you could feel big. And when you thought I was useless to you, you threw me away like garbage. I'm just returning the favor. But I'm doing it legally." Grace signaled to Ethan. He handed her a set of keys. I'm changing the locks in 10 minutes, Grace said. I suggest you leave before I call the police for trespassing. Liam stepped forward. Grace, about the lawsuit. If we leave quietly, will you drop it? Please. We have nothing left. Grace looked at her ex-husband. He looked pathetic. The charm was gone. The handsome face was haggard. She felt a final tether snap inside her chest. The last bit of love she had held on to evaporated. The lawsuit stands, Grace said. But I am feeling generous. She reached into her purse and pulled out a cream-colored envelope with gold embossing. She held it out to Victoria. What is this? Victoria asked, taking it with trembling fingers. An invitation, Grace said. My birthday is next week. I'm hosting it here, at my estate. I'm renaming it the Blackwood Manor. You want us to come to your party? Liam asked, confused hope rising in his eyes. Oh no. Grace smiled, and it was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I don't want you to attend as guests. I checked the employment roster for the catering company I hired, Elite Staffing. I saw 2 new names on the list for dishwashing and service staff, Victoria Harrison and Liam Harrison. Victoria gasped. She had applied to the agency yesterday in a moment of panic, using her maiden name, thinking she could work events in the next town over where no one knew her. She didn't realize Grace had hired that specific agency. If you want a paycheck, Grace said coolly, show up at 5:00 p.m. next Saturday. Uniforms are black pants and white shirts. And Victoria, make sure you polish the crystal. I want it spotless. Grace turned on her heel and walked toward the front door of her new mansion. Come on, Ethan, she said. We have a lot of redecorating to do. It smells like cheap perfume and desperation in there. She slammed the heavy oak door shut. Victoria stood in the rain, clutching the invitation. She looked at Liam. Dishwashers, she whispered. Liam got into the driver's seat of the Mercedes. Get in, Mom. We need the money. Victoria looked at the house one last time, the house she had ruled for 30 years. Now she was going to be scrubbing the plates of the people she used to look down on. She climbed into the car, and they drove away in defeat, leaving Grace to stand in the window of the master bedroom, watching the tail lights fade. Grace touched the glass. Checkmate. The kitchen of the estate, once a place Victoria Harrison had only entered to scold a chef for over-salting the bisque, was now a humid, chaotic inferno of clattering pans and shouting voices. The industrial dishwashers roared like jet engines, pumping out clouds of steam that made Victoria's hair frizz, a cardinal sin in her former life. Victoria stood hunched over a stainless steel sink that was deep enough to bathe a child in. Her hands, which had known only the touch of silk and the weight of diamonds for 30 years, were raw red and submerged in lukewarm, greasy water. Her manicure was a distant memory. 3 of her nails had broken in the last hour alone, jagged edges, catching on the rough sponges she was forced to use. Table 4 needs more crab cake, Suvit people. The catering manager, a man named Marcus with a vein that throbbed in his forehead, screamed from the pass. Victoria flinched. She was wearing a white button-down shirt that was 2 sizes too big and polyester black trousers that scratched her skin. The uniform of the invisible. Hey, you new girl, Marcus barked, pointing a clipboard at her. Stop daydreaming at the sink. We're down a server on the floor. Grab that tray of champagne and get out there. Circulate. And smile for God's sake. You look like you're attending a funeral. Victoria felt a lump form in her throat, hard and jagged. I can't go out there, she whispered, her voice trembling. I know these people. Please let me stay in the back. Marcus stepped closer. his face inches from hers. "I don't care if you know the Pope. You're on the clock. You want the $150, you take the tray, or you walk out the back door right now and sleep under a bridge. Your choice." Beside her, drying a stack of plates with a frantic energy, Liam grabbed her arm. He looked like a ghost of his former self. His eyes were hollow, rimmed with dark circles, and he had cut himself shaving, leaving a small, dried nick on his chin that looked pathetic under the harsh fluorescent lights. "Mom, please," Liam hissed, his voice desperate. "We have to pay the motel bill tomorrow, or they're kicking us out. Just keep your head down. No one looks at the help. You taught me that, remember?" The irony hit Victoria like a physical blow. She had taught him that. She had taught him that the people who served them were furniture background noise, non-entities. Now she was praying that her own lesson held true. With shaking hands, she wiped them on her apron and picked up the heavy silver tray laden with crystal flutes. The champagne bubbled cheerfully, mocking her misery. She pushed through the heavy swinging doors and stepped out of the purgatory of the kitchen and into the heaven she had lost. The ballroom was unrecognizable. Under Victoria's reign, the house had been a museum, cold beige and silent, filled with antiques that no one was allowed to touch. Grace had transformed it. The walls were draped in rich midnight blue velvet that absorbed the sound and made the room feel intimate despite its size. Thousands of fairy lights cascaded from the ceiling like a waterfall of stars, replacing the stiff, dusty chandelier Victoria had loved. The air smelled of jasmine and expensive cologne. Not the mothballs and floor wax of the past, and the music. It wasn't a boring string quartet playing Mozart. It was a live jazz band, soulful and vibrant, filling the space with an energy that made the floor vibrate beneath Victoria's cheap rubber-soled shoes. But it was the people that terrified her most. It wasn't just the stuffy, old Seattle crowd Victoria had cultivated. It was a mix of the old guard and the new power players. There were tech billionaires in hoodies and blazers, avant-garde artists, and the sharks of the venture capital world. Victoria lowered her head, letting her graying bangs fall over her eyes, and began to weave through the crowd. "Champagne," she whispered to a group of men near the fireplace. They took the glasses without looking at her, continuing their conversation. "The acquisition is genius," one man said. "Blackwood Global is going to dominate the sector, and to think she was living here the whole time under the radar." "I heard the ex-husband was a total fool," another man laughed. "Played front-end developer while she built the empire in the basement. Imagine fumbling a bag that big." Victoria felt her face burn. She moved away quickly, her heart hammering against her ribs. She turned a corner and nearly collided with a woman in a shimmering red dress. Victoria gasped and steadied the tray just in time. "Watch where you're going," the woman snapped. Victoria looked up and froze. It was Mrs. Eleanor Gable, the president of the Garden Club. The woman Victoria had spent decades trying to impress. The woman who had been at the Diamond Jubilee just weeks ago. Eleanor frowned, squinting at Victoria. "Wait a minute." Victoria tried to turn away, but Eleanor grabbed her arm. "Victoria." Eleanor's voice wasn't quiet. It was a shrill peal of shock that seemed to cut through the jazz music. "Victoria Harrison, is that you?" Heads turned. The circle of socialites around Eleanor stopped sipping their drinks. They looked at the woman in the ill-fitting waiter's uniform, holding a tray of champagne like a shield. "No," Victoria croaked, pulling her arm away. "You're mistaken." "Oh, it is you." Eleanor laughed, a cruel, delightful sound. "Oh, how quaint. I heard the rumors about the foreclosure, but I didn't realize things had become so hands-on. Are you working for the agency now?" I, Victoria stammered. She looked around for an escape, but she was hemmed in by the crowd. "Well," Eleanor sniffed, plucking a glass from Victoria's tray, "ideally the champagne should be chilled to 40 degrees. This feels a bit warm. Do try to do better next round, dear." The humiliation was a physical pain, a sharp twisting in her gut. Victoria wanted to scream. She wanted to throw the tray. But she couldn't. She needed the money. She retreated toward the wall, tears stinging her eyes. She bumped into Liam, who was carrying a tray of empty hors d'oeuvre plates. "They know," Victoria whispered, clutching Liam's sleeve. "Eleanor knows. They're laughing at us, Liam." "I know." Liam said, his jaw tight. "I just served a slider to Jessica Sterling. She didn't even recognize me. She looked right through me and asked for a napkin." Suddenly the jazz music swelled to a crescendo and then faded into a soft drum roll. The lights in the room dimmed, leaving only the spotlight focused on the grand staircase, the same staircase Victoria had descended for her birthday. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice announced over the speakers, "please welcome your host, the CEO of Blackwood Global and the new mistress of Blackwood Manor, Ms. Grace Blackwood." A collective gasp went through the room, followed by thunderous applause. Grace appeared at the top of the stairs. If Victoria had thought she knew Grace, she was wrong. The girl who used to wear oversized sweaters and apologize for taking up space was gone. In her place stood a queen. Grace was wearing a gown that looked like it was woven from the night sky, deep indigo silk that flowed like water dusted with crushed diamonds, that caught the spotlight with every step. Her hair, usually messy, was styled in sleek old Hollywood waves. She wore a necklace of sapphires that Victoria knew with a sinking heart was worth more than the entire Harrison estate had ever been. But it wasn't the dress. It was the way she walked. She didn't walk like she was afraid of the floorboards creaking. She walked like she owned the ground she stepped on. Beside her, holding her hand, was Ethan Blackwood. He looked fierce and protective, guiding her down the stairs. Grace reached the microphone at the bottom of the stairs. She smiled and the room seemed to brighten. "Thank you," she said, her voice clear and resonant. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate not just a birthday, but a rebirth." The crowd cheered. Liam and Victoria stood in the shadows near the kitchen doors, unable to look away. "A few weeks ago," Grace continued, her eyes scanning the room, "I was standing in this very room, being told that I wasn't enough, being told that my value was determined by the name I took or the service I provided." Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. Grace was talking about her. "I was told I was a lump of coal," Grace said, a wry smile touching her lips. "And I want to thank the people who said that, because the pressure you applied didn't crush me. It's what turns coal into diamonds." "To Grace!" someone shouted. "To Grace!" the room echoed. Grace raised a glass. As she took a sip, her eyes moved over the rim of the crystal. Slowly, deliberately, her gaze traveled to the back of the room. It cut through the darkness and locked onto Victoria. There was no anger in Grace's eyes. There was no fire. It was something far worse. It was a cool, detached amusement. It was the look a human gives an ant before stepping over it. She saw them. She saw the polyester uniforms. She saw the sweat. She saw the tray of dirty dishes in Liam's hands. And she smiled, a small, satisfied smile. The sheer weight of that look made Victoria's knees buckle. Her hands, slick with sweat and shaking from the adrenaline of shame, lost their grip. Crash! The sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. The heavy silver tray slipped from Victoria's fingers and hit the marble floor. 20 crystal flutes shattered instantly, sending shards of glass and sprays of expensive champagne exploding outward. The noise echoed off the high ceilings. The applause died instantly. The band stopped playing. Every single head in the room turned. Victoria stood in the center of the wreckage, champagne soaking the hem of her cheap trousers. She was frozen, her hands still suspended in the air, as if holding a ghost tray. "Oh my God," someone whispered. "It's the mother-in-law. Is she drunk? Look at the mess." Marcus, the catering manager, materialized out of nowhere, his face purple with rage. He grabbed Victoria by the shoulder, digging his fingers in hard. "You idiot!" Marcus hissed loud enough for the front row to hear. "That is vintage crystal. You are fired. Get out. You and your useless son, get out now." Victoria began to sob. It was a guttural, ugly sound. She dropped to her knees instinctively, trying to pick up the broken glass with her bare hands. "I'm sorry," she wept, blood welling on her thumb where a shard sliced her. "I'm sorry, I'll pay for it. Please don't fire me." Liam rushed over, dropping to his knees beside her. "Mum, stop. You're cutting yourself." It was a tableau of total defeat. The former queen of society and her prince kneeling in a puddle of spilled alcohol and broken glass, begging a catering manager for mercy in the middle of a ballroom they used to own. "Leave them alone." The voice cut through the tension like a knife. Grace Blackwood was walking toward them. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Her silk dress rustled softly as she moved. Marcus immediately let go of Victoria and straightened up, looking terrified. "Ms. Blackwood, I am so sorry. This temp agency sent me incompetence. I will have them removed and billed for the damage immediately." Grace stopped 3 feet from where Victoria and Liam were kneeling. She looked down at them. From this angle, she looked like a giant. "No," Grace said calmly. "Ms. Blackwood," Marcus stammered. "Don't fire them," Grace said. She didn't even look at Marcus. Her eyes were fixed on Victoria. "Accidents happen when people are out of their element." Victoria looked up, mascara running down her cheeks. She waited for the blow. She waited for Grace to tell everyone who they were, to mock them, to kick them out. But Grace didn't. Grace reached into her small beaded clutch. She pulled out a crisp $100 bill. She held it out not to Victoria, but to the air, letting it flutter down. It landed in the puddle of champagne next to Victoria's knee. "That should cover the glass," Grace said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "And keep the change as a tip. You look like you need it." The room was deadly silent. The insult was so subtle, yet so devastating. Grace wasn't treating them like enemies. She was treating them like charity cases. "Liam," Grace said, shifting her gaze to her ex-husband. Liam looked up, hope flashing in his eyes. "Grace, you missed a shard," she said, pointing a manicured finger at a piece of glass near his shoe. "Make sure you get it all. I want this floor spotless for the dancing." With that, she turned her back on them. She didn't look back. She walked back toward Ethan, who was waiting with a smile. "Maestro," Grace called out to the band leader. "Play something upbeat. The mess is being handled." The music roared back to life. The guests laughed and turned back to their conversations, the incident already forgotten. Victoria and Liam were left alone in their circle of shame. "Pick it up, Mum," Liam whispered, his voice broken. "I can't," Victoria sobbed. "Pick it up," Liam hissed, grabbing the wet $100 bill and stuffing it into his pocket. "We have to finish the shift." Slowly, painfully, Victoria Harrison began to pick up the pieces of the glass. She scrubbed the floor of the house she used to rule, wiping away the footprints of the woman she had tried to destroy. As she worked, she looked up one last time. She saw Grace laughing, throwing her head back in pure joy, surrounded by light and love. The revenge was complete. Grace hadn't just taken the house. She hadn't just taken the money. She had taken the only thing that mattered to Victoria, her dignity. And she had done it without raising her voice. As the party raged on into the night, the former masters of the house faded into the background, just ghosts in black polyester, cleaning up the feast of the winner. Wow. Talk about a total karmic reset. Grace proved that you should never judge a book by its cover, or a wife by her silence. Victoria and Liam thought they could throw Grace away like trash, but they ended up cleaning up her trash instead. It's the ultimate lesson. Be careful who you step on while you're climbing the ladder, because they might be the ones holding it when you fall. Grace showed true power in the end. She didn't scream, she didn't shout, and she didn't even have them thrown out. Instead, she let them keep their jobs, forcing them to watch her success from their knees while scrubbing her floors. That is a level of psychological revenge that stings way more than a lawsuit. What do you think? Did Grace let them off too easy? Or was the humiliation of serving her guests the perfect punishment? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and twists, please smash that like button. Share this video with a friend who needs some drama, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a story.